Women of BSV were invited to Block Venture Studios launch night, and this was held in Portman Square in London on Thursday, the 29th of September. I went along with my trusted iPhone SE 2020, so sorry about the sound quality, guys, and I videoed the event for you, so I hope you enjoy it. Now, you might be asking, who are Block Venture Studios? They are a sister company of the Block Dojo, and they are run by a team of experienced entrepreneurs. The managing director is Osman Kales of Block Dojo and Enchain, and Block Venture Studio partners with corporates to help derive tangible value from all the R&D, which is research and development, innovation, digital transformation and venture building activities happening within your business. Guest speakers were from companies such as Sky TV, ITV and Christie's The Auction House.
So my name is Luke, I work for Dean AVR. We currently have many venues around London. We're currently doing a little pop-up at this event here, running VR headsets. We're currently running two games, one of them being Beat Saber, which is a music game, another one being Tilt Brush, which is painting in a 3D space.
And I'm going to have a go.
Wow, look at this. It's incredible. I cannot believe this turned out. 3 months ago, I was on a call with our CEO and founder, and also our chairman, when the Block Venture Studio was just an idea. And actually, I'd like to say a huge thank you to our global CEO of the Block Dojo for taking a leap of faith. We had enough on our plate at the dojo, creating a global blockchain incubator, which is then going to be replicated around the world. But as if that wasn't enough, we then decided to create a venture studio as well. And our CEO and our chairman took a bet on me to say, okay, go ahead, go do it, go found it. Here we are today. This is amazing. So yeah, let's get into it. Someone once asked me, what is the USP of blockchain? We're going to be talking a lot about blockchain tonight, okay? What is the USP of blockchain? I love that question because it wasn't about what's the transaction speeds, what's the, I don't know, some other technical elements, which is good and important. But this was where you often find the considerations are kind of working from the inside out. This question is more from the outside in because this is what matters to users. And my answer to what is the defendable position of blockchain is this: that it empowers us to create unprecedented participation in our global institutions, our social, our public, our economic institutions. And this is super important because not everybody in the world gets to participate. It's really shocking that at any given moment in the world today there are over 2 billion people who are either unbanked or underbanked. That means they don't get access to financial services, they can't invest, they can't save, they can't grow, they can't lend. And it's outrageous that this should happen in our day and age. But guess what? In the blockchain industry, particularly Bitcoin world, we say Bitcoin fixes this, and actually it's true. The issue is, of course, that these guys, the network fees are just too high. to access the existing banking infrastructure. So, participation. 4 keys to participation. First, because we're talking about technology, right? We're talking about blockchain, and so therefore our context is, there's got to be data. It's one of the most precious resources within the technology environment, the context that we have. And we need to ensure that the data that we use is secure, that we can ensure the integrity of that data, and that anyone who's handling that data, people or processes, that we can verify who they are, right? The next is access. Access to global markets, access to marketplaces, ecosystems. Importantly, incentives come into play because we need to ensure that people are fairly rewarded for the work that they do. And finally, and I don't think we talk about this enough, in Web3 we're very keen to talk about democratizing data, but are we ready to have that data put back in our hands? Are we actually willing to take accountability for owning, for securing that data? I think there's a mindset shift that is necessary. So at the Block Venture Studio, thank you, we are on a mission to drive exponential participation, not just in global institutions like the ones I mentioned, but also our corporate partners organisations. Because blockchain it's unique. I'm going to refer to Bitcoin as the original implementation, and that is a complete financial system, which means it touches everything. So therefore, when we're thinking about what kinds of solutions we could be ideating, that we could be creating, we need to bring everybody to the table. And one of our panelists is going to talk about some of the complexities associated with that and give us some guidance about how to bring everybody to the table: HR, finance, business development, not just our engineering teams. Now, I probably ought to introduce myself. I'm the Managing Director. My name's Osman, and my team consists of Ari and Matthias, the Director of Research and Development and the Director of Ventures. And we are together working out the best ways to ensure that our corporate partners can take advantage of these opportunities. So how do we do this? Well, there are 2 parts to it, and quite handily our role banks come into play. Here we have our Innovation Lab, and we have our Venture Builder. The Innovation Lab is where we experiment, and the Venture Builder is where we execute. And these 2 elements, experimentation and execution, are absolutely key to innovating. Again, we want to drive participation with innovation as a tool. Now, in our Innovation Lab, and Ari's going to talk to us a little bit more about this shortly, we've defined a few really key activities. The first is figuring out what challenges really matter, because when we're looking at opportunities, they are going to be based on challenges, needs, problems, and which ones should we be focusing on? So we found a way to figure out what really matters to our corporate partners and to their customers as well, using our proprietary framework, which is ESG based. We then apply some of our value hypotheses to prioritize the opportunities, and then and only then do we start to even think about what a solution could look like. And in that case, we're not even thinking about technical solutions, but commercial solutions in our ideation jam. Is that me? In our ideation jam. And in our ideation jam, we look at the market dynamics, pricing, size of market, competitors, barriers to entry. And we haven't even started to write one line of code yet. That does come. The thing I'm really excited about that we've put together is the concept of the avatar company. And this is the best-in-class business that our corporate partners who we work with could create today. When we take that avatar company, now Ari's going to talk us through some of the use cases that he's prepared tonight from the 50 or so that we've created so far. And then we drop those into our venture builder. Now this is where Matthias will take these validated challenges, these concepts, and turn them into something that actually develops a return or creates a return for our corporate partners. Experimenting over here, executing over here. We validate the problems, we then recruit business operators to run these new businesses that we founded within our incubator program. And these guys are professionals that have a mix of entrepreneurial flair. And then we build. Now, our promise is an MVP within 100 days. You all right with that? It is. And then finally we scale. Our holy grail is product market fit. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're driving for. Tonight we're going to take you through a whole series of things that we feel incredibly excited and impassioned about, that have inspired us, that have helped us to focus on what's really important, and we want to offer that out to you as, hopefully, as guidance for your innovation journey. So I'm going to hand over to Ari now, who is going to take us through some of our avatar companies. But before we do, one thing I want to share is what our vision is for the Venture Studio, which is that through participation, we work together, we collaborate, we take risks, we take challenges, we face those challenges head on. We de-risk those challenges for our corporate partners, that's what we do, and in so doing, we create a platform, we co-create a platform for humanity's best work. Thank you very much.
Alright, so I have a very limited amount of time, so I'm not going to talk about myself because that's an end of story. Some of you know me already, and I'm just going to get off and start in the middle of it, basically. You guys have heard a lot about the art of the possible. It's a phrase that we use a lot. We use a lot during presentations, we use a lot during conversations that we have with the corporates that we're working with, but our art of the possible is limited in some way. It's limited in that we only pursue opportunities or use cases that are achievable today. Things that we can build today with the tools that we have today, for challenges that we have to meet today, and solutions that can actually be built today. So if you're here to listen to some far-out story about how blockchain is going to change the fabric of time and space and reality, you're in the wrong room. If you're interested in actually solving some of the problems that you guys, we, people in general, and companies in general are facing, then you are definitely in the right room. Because that's what we do at the studio. We build products and solutions for problems that are here today. That's good. So how do we do that? We are utilizing the blockchain for functionality and utility that it has right now. Because a lot of the utility that's there, it's very much underutilized for a lot of reasons, which we're not going to go into. But what we are doing is actually using the technology that's available right now without the need for scale in the future or tooling that's not there yet, or people that don't have the right education for it yet, or need all kinds of training to actually use these services. So for us, it's important that it's usable right now. One of the things that I personally am very excited about is private identities. I mean, we all know the issues with private identities. On one hand, you have to be compliant to KYC, AML regulations. On the other hand, you have to be compliant to GDPR. On one hand, you want to decrease decrease the friction for onboarding new users for whatever service. On the other hand, you want to increase the security of that service itself. So there's a lot of challenges to be met right there. And the Bitcoin blockchain, the original Bitcoin blockchain, solves this problem beautifully because identities are firewalled, which means the transaction that is taking place is not tied to a specific identity, but can be anchored to a specific identity or a specific entity. And this information can be disclosed at will or not, if that's not necessary. So if you don't need to know who's sending this transaction or who's owning this data, then you shouldn't know who's sending that transaction or who's owning that data. And if you do, then you do. So in the original Bitcoin protocol, identities are firewalled, which means that this opens a lot of opportunities that are not yet utilized in our industry. Even though we're there for 10, 12 years now. Some of us are maybe even there for 20 years before blockchain was even called blockchain. I see particularly one person here that's been involved in this space before it was even called this space. What I would like to show you is two of the avatar companies that we're working on that have to do with private identities and how we utilize private identities on the original Bitcoin protocol.
Identity verification, such as geographical position, plus age, plus employment, plus address, is mandatory for a variety of industries, creating a high cost for businesses, plus a high friction for users, which in turn equals a loss of customers and engagement. A solution powered by blockchain technology would enable reusable KYC checks by only revealing information that is necessary, thus reducing the cost for businesses and removing barriers for new users of services needing to verify their identities. Third-party cookies and data sharing have long been the backbone of digital advertising. Due to privacy issues and regulations, tech giants like Apple and Google are moving towards first-party data, but does this problem signal the end for digital advertising? A solution powered by blockchain technology would enable and incentivize users to share their personal data with selected companies, where they want and when they want, through shares in ad revenue via micropayments, featuring full GDPR compliance and user-owned access control.
Yeah, one thing that I would like to stress out is that any solution that we're working on and that we're going to be working on in the future will completely abstract away the blockchain and Bitcoin part. Users or businesses using these solutions will not have to know anything about Bitcoin or ever be exposed to it or its volatility. It's all abstracted away in the back end. So we're focusing on actually offering the utility, the functionality that the chain has, and creating value in that way. And we're abstracting away completely the blockchain and Bitcoin part because we feel like that's not the most important part about this technology. It's more about utility. The second thing that is basically baked into the original Bitcoin protocol, which most of these other protocols have been derived from, is distributed data storage. This is something that's been underutilized from the get-go due to scaling issues. Obviously, the first implementation of Bitcoin did not have the capabilities to be able to handle large amounts of data. We're at a point now where we can do that. And especially with the original Bitcoin protocol, it's unbounded. As long as there's an economic incentive for a miner to mine a transaction, no matter how big the transaction is, he will mine that transaction. And we have a miner here right now who will probably tell you more about that. But distributed data storage is something very important to us and something that we utilize a lot in basically all of our avatar companies because it offers immutable, secure, and cheap data storage. It's done in a way that's not done before, and we use it in a way that's not done before. And here are two of the use cases that we're working on right now.
Problem. Brands are struggling to engage with customers in a broadcast environment saturated with content. This fact is further compounded by the desire of the latest generation of content consumers to be engaged by new and innovative formats. A creative solution powered by blockchain technology is to twin and embed digital content into physical objects and locations, creating a truly immersive digital and real-world experience, unlocking unlimited engagement opportunities for brands to reach their existing and future customers. If cybersecurity is a critical factor for all enterprises and cyber attackers typically delete all log files, how do you quickly identify security incidents? With blockchain technology, you can. How? Through the use of immutable timestamp records allowing for complete data integrity and access on the BSV blockchain, you can immutably store all log files, thus allowing for immediate identification of cyber security incidents.
Yes, and the third functionality that's baked into the original Bitcoin protocol is it's immutable timestamping. This immutable timestamping is part of the solution for the double spend problem, or the business deliverables problem, and we use this functionality to do all kinds of things. One of the things is synchronization between software, hardware, or entities. Another, which is to me the most interesting part of immutable timestamping, is the legal trail of evidence. Because as you've noticed probably, we're very open with the concepts that we're working on, with the avatar companies that we're working on. Some of them are even for some of you that we're working on it. And the reason that we're so open with it is because all of these ideas have been stored on-chain, encrypted, which offers us a legal trail of evidence. If one of you takes one of these ideas and makes £1 billion, then we have a legal trail of evidence showing where this idea actually originated from. And that's the way that we use immutable timestamping. It's a legal trail of evidence and a way of showing that something happened at some point of time. That's it, basically. Thank you all. If you have any questions, please on my jacket or whatever during the evening, because there's a lot more that I would like to say, but I don't have the time for it.
Hello everyone, good evening. Thank you for coming as well, and I hope you had a great evening so far. My name is Matthias Lignet Hope. It's a mouthful, I know, but I will be the director of Block Venture Studios. And I'd like to give you a high-level overview of the program that we will be using and discuss some of the key pillars of how we view venture building. We've been incredibly fortunate that we've been able to build upon the expertise of the Block Dojo to build our program, but obviously the purpose of what we are doing is actually quite different, and that will be reflected within the program. We're not in the business of building unicorns. We are here to basically help you reinvent your company in the face of radical technological disruption. So the way that I like to think about it is we're in the business of building phoenixes. It's a term coined by Peter Hinson, but it basically means that it is established companies that have the courage to embrace change and to disrupt themselves before somebody else does. And as a result of that, they are able to stay relevant today, tomorrow, and beyond. That's obviously a very ambitious goal, and therefore our program is also quite in-depth. It's up to 12 months, because we want to make sure that at the end of that program, we have a proper, viable, profitable business that is able to stand on its own. So if you have a little look at the program, the overview of the program, the core concept is actually relatively simple. We take an idea, we turn it into a product, and then we scale it into a business. Pretty straightforward. Now, one of the main advantages that we have is that we are external from the company you're working with, and therefore we have the freedom to be creative, to experiment, and ultimately to learn how to, what actually works in the real world and out there in the market. So one of the key pillars of our program is the concept of iteration, which will come through in all the phases of our program. First of all, we will validate our idea before we start building a product, because we want to be sure that we are actually solving a problem that our customers are having. Before we start scaling business, we will test our product extensively, because again, we want to make sure that what we are building is actually something that our customers want. And only once we have a validated idea and a tested product, then we start scaling and optimizing our business. So as you see at every stage, we check to clearly define goals and metrics, whether or not it is worth taking this venture forward, and so not waste any resources. So what is in it for you, basically, as a corporate? It's basically a combination of the best of both worlds, because we can provide the creativity and speed of innovation of the startup, but because we work together with you from the start, we are also able to make sure that the little puzzle piece that we're building, that it actually solves a problem you're having, and that later on, it will actually fit in the larger organizational puzzle of your company. And it's obviously de-risks the whole innovation process substantially. This is just a general overview of it. There's a lot more to talk about this, but and I would love to go into more detail about it, but these are like the core principles of our program. If you want to know more, feel free to add me on LinkedIn, or just, even better, say hi tonight. I would love to chat with you, have a drink, and discuss unicorns and phoenixes. So thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Richard Baker. I'm the CEO for TAL, and I will introduce you to our company and what we do. But firstly, congratulations, Osman, on this venture studio. I guess our company has been part of the BSV ecosystem for quite a long time, and we're the largest mining operator within the BSV blockchain. I think we have a duty and a responsibility to try and make sure we're there as you incubate new venture strategies with corporates and enterprises to make sure that the technology is accessible and it can be used in today's use cases. And I like what you did in talking about the problems of today. So I'll go this side so I can give a nod to the screen. So I am going to go a little bit into the future as well as talk about today. So I don't know whether we really realize this, and it's always intimidating doing this session when the inventor of this protocol, this technology, is sitting in the room to judge every single word we use. So I'll try and do justice. But I'm getting old. I'm 50 now, and I'm sad enough to have lived through a lot of that top line. And I think I'd like to just talk about the role of convergence and a very, very special moment I think we're finding ourselves in the world, and the fact that we are about to live through the next big digital transformation, convergence moment. And it is the convergence of the future of data. So the journey at the top of this chart is effectively looking at the evolution from the telecoms industry back in the 1980s, early 90s, where telco companies were analog and they started to move to digital. But services back in the 80s were largely voice. And it wasn't really until late 80s, early 1991, when Cisco came along and invented, or implemented, not invented, but put in TCP/IP and IP networking. And all of a sudden we started to see Web 1.0, static IP addresses, the internet emerging. And I remember conversations for the firms I worked in that, what is this internet? What is that killer use case? What's the killer app? What are we going to be designing and building? And of course, none of us knew what that was. SMS became the killer app for mobile operators, unexpectedly, and it's still here with us today. But this was the first era of disruption, and of course, telco companies became network service providers, went on to become internet service providers. In the mid-2000s, Web 2.0, the dynamic internet. And I certainly, again, remember living through my ownership of my CDs and my DVDs. And no, I'm not giving up my content. I really value those things on the shelf. And of course, we started to see peer-to-peer streaming services brands that have gone, but now brands that are with us, like Spotify and others I could mention. But we saw a transformation through the dynamic internet of streaming protocols running on this TCP/IP network that invented services. And I think all of us in this room now carry billions of tunes in our mobile phones and on any device that we want. And so at times it's very difficult to understand what these disruptive technologies really mean to the change in service architectures and our personal experiences. So the transformation we're living through right now is the concept of Web 3.0, the Internet of Value. And this means many things to many people at the moment. But as we've just heard tonight, it certainly means the role of beginning the process of taking back our data, being responsible for our data, permissioning the use of our data, our personal IDs, through the concept of digital wallets, permission keys, the private-public key relationship that's available in the Bitcoin blockchain network, and effectively authenticating through a rewards mechanism, an incentive mechanism, how I want service providers to use my data. So the world is changing around us. However, I think convergence that is not always obvious is the evolution of money is also plotting its course at the same time as the evolution of data. So as we look at the Web 3.0 journey, which will be underpinning the next kind of 5 to 10 years, we are also amidst a significant transformation of cash and money systems. And banking and money systems have changed throughout generations. But of course, what the Bitcoin protocol heralded was the concept of a digital cash system. And this is about the fact that I can start to think about a micropayments system, a micropayments being embedded in all of the experiences that I choose to interact with on the web, but also through peer-to-peer and disintermediating existing actors. And I think it's only when we start to think about these two together that we get to build an understanding of what Web3 and metaverse concepts begin to look like. And I will touch briefly on metaverse before I move on. Metaverse is heralded as, I guess, a virtual world today, but the reality actually is it's going to become another convergence moment of our physical experience with the virtual world. And around the world we see smart cities. We certainly now see through decarbonisation the journey that we're on to see electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles in our cities in 2030 onwards. And as we start to look at these connected autonomous vehicles driving around smart cities, they rely on a very different architecture, Internet of Things, 5G networks. And these networks actually start to become peer-to-peer payment systems in their own right. So the transactions of the future on a micropayments architecture are things perhaps that you and I won't be involved with. My car will pay for its own usage on the road. It'll pay for its own charging. My car will charge back into the electric network. I won't be part of that transaction. It'll just settle into my wallet. And this really is the big journey of the MetaNet and the metaverse. And as I took over and started to run TAL earlier this year, we certainly face our challenges when we talk to corporate enterprises about the use of blockchain. I think blockchain has come through two kind of hype cycles in the last 5 to 10 years. One, a distortion, the cryptocurrency phase. Why do we need 22,000 cryptocurrencies? None of those really display a utility value. They're largely speculative. I think the concept of tokenization has been distorted by coinage. Sorry, next slide please. We've also seen private blockchains being implemented in corporate enterprises, understandably, and I'll touch on this a little bit later, but if I've really just come through a journey of cutting off my enterprise servers and hosting on-premise, and I really just only in the last 5 to 7 years moved to cloud computing and trusting the cloud to run my business, the step into blockchain is a very big step. So I'm really expecting an evolution, not a revolution. I'm not expecting to switch all of my cloud computing architecture over to a blockchain. These things have to coexist. But what we have seen spectacularly in the last 18 months is a significant rise in investment in blockchain technologies. And I'm just going to unpick the market a little bit here. And this is why I think the venture studio and the ecosystem that is building in the BSV community is so important. So Alphabet, Google, no surprise, 1.5 billion spent in blockchain technologies in the last 18 months. But we've seen big institutions step in, where up until really September 2021, we had not seen that. And I point out some of the solution sets that they've been investing in. And we've heard a little bit about them already, but tokenization of any asset, the digitization of an asset, we commonly hear about it as an NFT. But actually, it's much bigger than that. It's the tokenization of an Internet of Things device. It's the tokenization of my building, my vehicle. So the concept of an NFT is a great starting point, but there's so much more to come. And I think as part of this, the digitization of supply chains is a very big feature. And so, I think as the world becomes concerned about efficiency, the origin of food, serving the global population, actually traceability is a very, very big theme that ultimately we're going to see blockchain solve. So I'll build on this picture in the fact that, next slide please, there are some macro trends that can be brought down to some granular insights actually in the investments that are happening around the world. And so again, I just mentioned the transformation in money flowing into the blockchain industry just in the last 18 months. So we've seen 7 consecutive quarters now of very significant funds. And the trend, whilst I mentioned just a few, is actually falling in 3 themes. The application layer, so reinventing services and applications that we experience in our personal and professional lives. The transactional layer, so the future of commerce, and foundational layer technologies. And if we look a little bit deeper on these, no surprise, I think on the application layer, we've seen an explosion in the area of content moving onto blockchain technologies. So streaming services, gaming, video, has been a very big move, and a lot of that being reconnecting or rebuilding the next generation of social networks. Enterprises, certainly in healthcare, supply chain, now telecoms have been moving. The transactional layer and the foundational layer is where we at TAL spend a lot of our time. We don't spend our time in the application layer, our customers are in that layer. But in the transactional layer, uniquely to the Bitcoin protocol, is a very significant transformation of how the future of institutional payments, custody, retail payments and custody will work. And I won't drop down into all of that today, but at a foundational layer, and a few of my colleagues have talked about it, but none of you really need to know into the future the underlying Bitcoin scripting language. We need to help customers abstract through a service platform how to use the Bitcoin protocol and the Bitcoin blockchain to run everyday business. So whilst there is now an infinite amount of documentation available on GitHub and all kinds of resources to get into that, our job, I think, as a team is to try and help real utility access to this as a service platform. And so again, we talk here about a MetaNet service provider, and I link to the journey where I used at the start about the evolution of the web. So as telcos became internet service providers and network service providers, the role of mining is changing. So mining is a fundamental part of how you underpin a proof of work blockchain. But actually the value added there on top of mining is around underpinning MetaNet service platforms that enable effectively the use of commerce, monetizing data, and effectively realizing and managing the life cycle of an asset as you digitize it. And these are all big markets that are underway with transformation. And so, as we look at these 3 lenses, what we pay attention to, and we had it from Osman at the start, which is I will resist going deep on the technology, but we can't get away from the fact that we have an explosion of blockchain technologies around the world. But when we think about 1 trillion transactions that are currently in our cashless payment systems today, about to double, about to triple, we need an infrastructure that will scale to support that evolution. And the Bitcoin protocol is actually the only protocol that will do that and hold transaction fees at a low level. And the ecosystem that we're involved in and the customer base is now truly quite diverse, from healthcare companies to multiple gaming platforms to a whole host of content companies that are transforming digital media And of course, along the way, exchanges and wallets that are making that accessible and enabling retail consumers as well as business customers to move on to the blockchain. And so I start at the beginning. This is an evolution, not a revolution. And so I think as we've come from enterprise data, we have heard, I think, in the last 10 years, as we moved into cloud and big data, that data is the new oil. But actually data hasn't been monetized yet. We monetize analytics, we monetize insights, but actually our data, in the way that it's used for attribution today, is not monetized by me. And this is the big journey board of bringing data and commerce together in how blockchain powers that. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Richard Baker. I'm the CEO for TAL, and I will introduce you to our company and what we do. But firstly, congratulations, Osman, on this venture studio. I guess our company has been part of the BSV ecosystem for quite a long time, and we're the largest mining operator within the BSV blockchain. I think we have a duty and a responsibility to try and make sure we're there as you incubate new venture strategies with corporates and enterprises to make sure that the technology is accessible and it can be used in today's use cases. And I like what we did in talking about the problems of today. So I'll go this side so I can give a nod to the screen. So I am going to go a little bit into the future as well as talk about today. So I don't know whether we really realize this, and it's always intimidating doing this session when the inventor of this protocol, this technology is sitting in the room to judge every single word you use. So I'll try and do justice. But I'm getting old, I'm 50 now, and I'm sad enough to have lived through a lot of that top line. And I think I'd like to just talk about the role of convergence and a very, very special moment I think we're finding ourselves in the world, and the fact that we are about to live through the next big digital transformation, convergence moment. And it is the convergence of the future of data. So the journey at the top of this chart is effectively looking at the evolution from the telecoms industry back in the 1980s, early 90s, where telco companies were analog and they started to move to digital. But services back in the 80s were largely voice. And it wasn't really until late 80s, early 1991, when Cisco came along and invented, or implemented, not invented, but put in TCP/IP and IP networking. And all of a sudden we started to see Web 1.0, static IP addresses, the internet emerging. And I remember conversations for the firms I worked in that, what is this internet? What is that killer use case? What's the killer app? What are we going to be designing and building? And of course, none of us knew what that was. SMS became the killer app for mobile operators, unexpectedly, and it's still here with us today. But this was the first era of disruption. And of course, telco companies became network service providers, went on to become internet service providers. In the mid-2000s, Web 2.0, the dynamic internet. And I certainly, again, remember living through my ownership of my CDs and my DVDs. And no, I'm not giving up my content. I really value those things on the shelf. And of course, we started to see peer-to-peer streaming services, brands that have gone, but now brands that are with us, like Spotify and others I could mention. But we saw a transformation through the dynamic internet of streaming protocols running on this TCP/IP network that invented services. And I think all of us in this room now carry billions of tunes in our mobile phones and on any device that we want. And so at times it's very difficult to understand what these disruptive technologies really mean to the change in service architectures and our personal experiences. So the transformation we're living through right now is the concept of Web 3.0, the Internet of Value. And this means many things to many people at the moment. But as we've just heard tonight, it certainly means the role of beginning the process of taking back our data, being responsible for our data, permissioning the use of our data. our personal IDs through the concept of digital wallets, permission keys, the private-public key relationship that's available in the Bitcoin blockchain network, and effectively authenticating through a rewards mechanism, an incentive mechanism, how I want service providers to use my data. So the world is changing around us. However, I think convergence that is not always obvious is the evolution of money is also plotting its course at the same time as the evolution of data. So as we look at the Web 3.0 journey, which will be underpinning the next kind of 5 to 10 years, we are also amidst a significant transformation of cash and money systems. And banking and money systems have changed throughout generations. But of course, what the Bitcoin protocol heralded was the concept of a digital cash system. And this is about the fact that I can start to think about a micropayments system. A micropayments being embedded in all of the experiences that I choose to interact with on the web, but also through peer-to-peer and disintermediating existing actors. And I think it's only when we start to think about these two together that we get to build an understanding of what Web3 and metaverse concepts begin to look like. And I will touch briefly on metaverse before I move on. Metaverse is heralded as, I guess, a virtual world today, but the reality actually is it's going to become another convergence moment of our physical experience with the virtual world. And around the world we see smart cities. We certainly now see through decarbonisation the journey that we're on to see electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles in our cities in 2030 onwards. And as we start to look at these connected autonomous vehicles driving around smart cities, they rely on a very different architecture, Internet of Things, 5G networks. And these networks actually start to become peer-to-peer payment systems in their own right. So the transactions of the future on a micropayments architecture are things perhaps that you and I won't be involved with. My car will pay for its own usage on the road. It'll pay for its own charging. My car will charge back into the electric network. I won't be part of that transaction. It'll just settle into my wallet. And this really is the big journey of the MetaNet and the metaverse. And as I took over and started to run TAL earlier this year, we certainly face our challenges when we talk to corporate enterprises about the use of blockchain. I think blockchain has come through two kind of hype cycles in the last 5 to 10 years. One, a distortion, the cryptocurrency phase. Why do we need 22,000 cryptocurrencies? None of those really display a utility value. They're largely speculative. I think the concept of tokenization has been distorted by coinage. Sorry, next slide please. We've also seen private blockchains being implemented in corporate enterprises, understandably, and I'll touch on this a little bit later, but if I've really just come through a journey of cutting off my enterprise servers and hosting on-premise, and I really just only in the last 5 to 7 years moved to cloud computing and trusting the cloud to run my business, the step into blockchain is a very big step. So I'm really expecting an evolution, not a revolution. I'm not expecting to switch all of my cloud computing architecture over to a blockchain. These things have to coexist. But what we have seen spectacularly in the last 18 months is a significant rise in investment in blockchain technologies. And I'm just going to unpick the market a little bit here. And this is why I think the venture studio and the ecosystem that is building in the BSV community is so important. So Alphabet, Google, no surprise, 1.5 billion spent in blockchain technologies in the last 18 months. But we've seen big institutions step in, where up until really September 2021, we had not seen that. And I point out some of the solution sets that they've been investing in. And we've heard a little bit about them already, but tokenization of any asset, the digitization of an asset, we commonly hear about it as an NFT. Actually, it's much bigger than that. It's the tokenization of an Internet of Things device. It's the tokenization of my building, of my vehicle. So the concept of an NFT is a great starting point, but there's so much more to come. And I think as part of this, the digitization of supply chains is a very big feature. And so, I think as the world becomes concerned about efficiency, the origin of food, serving the global population, actually traceability is a very, very big theme that ultimately we're going to see blockchain solve. So I'll build on this picture in the fact that, next slide please, there are some macro trends that can be brought down to some granular insights actually in the investments that are happening around the world. And so again, I just mentioned the transformation in money flowing into the blockchain industry just in the last 18 months. So we've seen 7 consecutive quarters now of very significant funds. And the trend, whilst I mentioned just a few, is actually falling in 3 themes. The application layer, so reinventing services and applications that we experience in our personal and professional lives. The transactional layer, so the future of commerce, and foundational layer technologies. And if we look a little bit deeper on these, no surprise, I think, on the application layer, we've seen an explosion in the area of content moving onto blockchain technologies. So streaming services, gaming, video, has been a very big move, and a lot of that being reconnecting or rebuilding the next generation of social networks. Enterprises, certainly in healthcare, supply chain, now telecoms have been moving. The transactional layer and the foundational layer is where we at TAL spend a lot of our time. We don't spend our time in the application layer, our customers are in that layer. But in the transactional layer, uniquely to the Bitcoin protocol, is a very significant transformation of how the future of institutional payments, custody, retail payments and custody will work. And I won't drop down into all of that today, but at a foundational layer, and a few of my colleagues have talked about it, but none of you really need to know into the future the underlying Bitcoin scripting language. We need to help customers abstract through a service platform how to use the Bitcoin protocol and the Bitcoin blockchain to run everyday business. So whilst there is now an infinite amount of documentation available on GitHub and all kinds of resources to get into that, our job, I think, as a team is to try and help real utility access to this as a service platform. And so again, we talk here about a MetaNet service provider, and I linked to the journey board I used at the start about the evolution of the web. So as telcos became internet service providers and network service providers, the role of mining is changing. So mining is a fundamental part of how you underpin a proof of work blockchain. But actually the value added there on top of mining is around underpinning MetaNet service platforms that enable effectively the use of commerce, monetizing data, and effectively realizing and managing the life cycle of an asset as you digitize it. And these are all big markets that are underway with transformation. And so, as we look at these 3 lenses, what we pay attention to, and we had it from Osman at the start, which is I will resist going deep on the technology, but we can't get away from the fact that we have an explosion of blockchain technologies around the world. But when we think about 1 trillion transactions that are currently in our cashless payment systems today, about to double, about to triple, we need an infrastructure that will scale to support that evolution. And the Bitcoin protocol is actually the only protocol that will do that and hold transaction fees at a low level. And the ecosystem that we're involved in and the customer base is now truly quite diverse, from healthcare companies to multiple gaming platforms to a whole host of content companies that are transforming digital media, and of course along the way exchanges and wallets that are making that accessible and enabling retail consumers as well as business customers to move on to the blockchain. And so I start at the beginning. This is an evolution, not a revolution. And so I think as we've come from enterprise data, we have heard, I think in the last 10 years, as we moved into cloud and big data, that data is the new oil. But actually data hasn't been monetized yet. We monetize analytics, we monetize insights, but actually our data, in the way that it's used for attribution today, is not monetized by me. And this is the big journey board of bringing data and commerce together in how blockchain powers that. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody. So I'm working for ITV Studios, and you probably all know the network. So what does the studios do? We do develop content and we distribute it actually around the world. So our catalog contains like the most wanted content brands in the market. So we have brands like The Voice, Long Island, Hell's Kitchen, Schitt's Creek, and we do distribute them to streamers or broadcasters, but also, you know, creating very strong brands. We do a lot in the field of brand and licensing. So that can vary from events to mobile gaming to gambling to anything and everything basically. So the space of the metaverse, if you like, the Web3 space, is definitely interesting for us in terms of what can we do with our brands in that space and how can we experiment there. So our way of working defines a very simple rule: fail fast and fail cheap. But we do feel we really need to try and innovate. So what we do, we just take on projects that we think could be great, but we make sure if they don't work, that we can get out as fast as we can. So our strategic approach to content is actually, you know, we have a lot of formats around the world that are being created, so we curate them to see, you know, are they interesting for the international market? You know, are they able to become big brands? And then we actually provide multi-distribution, multi-screen distribution, of course, because that can be streamers, that can be on TV, that can be YouTube, it can be anything and everything. We produce it, but then the main part is, you know, how do we monetize them in the best way? So, for example, The Voice in Nepal, so we earn more money with that show on YouTube than we do on the actual broadcast, if you like, right? So looking at that multi-channel monetization, we have a lot of partners coming to us and saying, you know, can we do this with your brand? Can we do that? Can we do... And this is like sort of how do we approach the market? So we try to find partners that we feel are sort of best in class. And especially in Web3, we did a great project, on Thunderbirds with Reality Gaming Group. They came to us and said, Thunderbirds is such a classic brand. Can we develop NFTs for you? And we said, okay, that could be very interesting. But then it all comes down, obviously, you know, is it brand authentic? Is the development, the creative development, is that right for the target group? So that takes a while for us to figure out what it is. To be honest, the first proposal they did to us, we need to do something with apes, because apes are big NFTs. And we're like, well, apes have nothing to do with Thunderbirds. So we're not going to do that. So it is a journey that we take with the partners to be able to get it right. And so the first NFT drop is actually tomorrow on avatars, and next week on digital artworks, which look amazing. So for us, it is to see, you know, will it do anything for the brand? Well, honestly, the brand is so old, we don't need any brand building, but will it bring money for us? So then The Voice, that you probably know, is like the biggest talent format in the world. We got approached by a company called Avakin, and they really wanted to set up an experience. And we really believed in that because it's very close to what we do, like creating experiences. So we did a project with them, and for them it was pretty successful, as in the brand brought in a lot of consumers. But then when we look at it from a monetization point of view, it actually never converted into bringing actual money in. So then we start to see like, okay, this is not how we need to do it, right? Even though it can be good for the brand, it also needs to relate to something. So now we're starting with Virtual Brand Group in the US, and these are backed by NBC, the broadcaster, to really develop anything and everything around the voice to see whether what can work and what cannot. Most important thing is, if it's not working, how do we get out, right? Because we do not want to license our brand forever into this space to a company that doesn't understand. So this is always an interesting point from a legal perspective. How do we protect ourselves in terms of, you know, is it safe and secure, but also doesn't it hurt the brand? So it's the other challenges that we have basically. And then we work a lot with Gordon Ramsay. And for example, we have a lot of Hell's Kitchen restaurants across the world, super successful. But he is somebody who's very interested in this Web3 space, right? He's a fantastic entrepreneur. And we actually approached him with the sandbox. And this was supposed to go live in March, but it will go live in August. So we will have like a restaurant experience there, but also gaming in the sandbox, which could be very exciting. We actually own a big piece of land there as ITV. Now the question is, does ITV, is ITV aware of that? And how do we secure that in the company? So you come into a lot of discussions, not even only with the board, but also with the lawyers, like how do we, for a company as ITV, manage this in the right way?
Could you explain what the sandbox is?
Yeah, the sandbox is one of the sort of newer platforms. So if you look at Fortnite and Roblox, Sandbox is one, it's like a decentralized land basically. So what's next? Our aim is to supersize our brands through Web3. No matter in what kind of form that is, you can imagine for Love Island, we could do fantastic festivals in the virtual world or concerts or something. But we always need to find a partner that understands as well and also is able to translate the brand into the space. What we would love to do, and we started a company called Metavision to develop new IP with Web3 fully integrated. Could even start there in the space and then potentially go on to a streamer. And for business processes, we love the transparency of Web3 and how can we then implement that in our business processes. And that's basically it. I'll be on the panel. Any questions?
Of the global CEO of the Block Dojo Group, Craig Massey.
Okay, so the main object of the exercise of this event is obviously to launch Block Venture Studios, but really it's also to kind of demystify what blockchain is all about. It's to give you some great use cases, and what we're hoping, of course, is to get you all kind of hot and excited that you actually will start to recognise the enormous opportunities there are with blockchain. And I've gone through that very journey, which I'm going to share with you. So, hang on, let me go back. Keep on sharing too quickly there, a little premature. So, one of the things that I genuinely believe, having gone through this kind of research exercise, is that I believe that blockchain will literally be all pervasive. It will permeate every single corner of society. And what's amazing is that when you actually look at the use of blockchain and what can happen, it's absolutely amazing. So I'm willing to do a little wager with every single person here tonight. And this is going to be coming out of my own pocket. So if we cannot demonstrate to you guys that we will either improve in terms of your processes, we will either reduce your costs, or we will generate new revenue streams. If we can't demonstrate that, then I am willing to pay out of my own pocket £500 towards your favourite charity. Any single person here. So, now the thing is, I'm quite confident that I'm going to win. And I'll tell you why. Because of three key factors. Number one, we're very good at tech startups. Like, sort of me and my team, we've got, I think there's about 14 of us now. We've got huge amounts of experience of being able to understand tech startups. We have the blockchain, which is just the most amazing kind of evolution of technology. And once you actually start to understand what it's capable of doing, you'll realise that literally in every single department within your corporate, blockchain is of use. And then we've got this new thing. We've got this new protocol. Now, can you imagine anything more dull? This thing here, IPv6, it's one of the most amazing transformational protocols ever invented, and they leave it to a techie to name it. Bad idea. So I think it should actually be the instant, direct communication. It should be an acronym, IDC, because that's exactly what it is. Okay, so let's talk about our creds first. Oh, I don't know why the headings don't come up, but anyway. So, in that case, we as the Block Venture Studio, in terms of the team that we have, we've had started 17 companies, we've had 11 exits for multi-millions, and we still have 3 companies on the go. So with the Block Venture Studio, we've got the Block Dojo, and we're about to start Miami early next year. Now, when I first stumbled into the whole kind of magic world of blockchain, it's because I just sold my last company. And I sold it to those lovely folks at Zoopla for a very tiny penny. And therefore, as a consequence, I was retired. And I was there sort of just... the one thing about retirement is you've got a load of time on your hands. So I started to investigate the blockchain. And I stumbled upon, I started reading and I was like, holy shit, has anyone seen 2001 A Space Odyssey? Where, you know, the apes kind of like bump into that obelisk. And it's like, essentially, it's like the evolution of mankind. It's like the realization. It felt like that. Because what was amazing was that I started digging into it and I was like, Christ, nobody really knows about this. And yet, it's amazing. It's going to transform everything. So, I did loads of research. Now, at the time, I was in Antigua. This is in fact Colombia. That's me in my hammock. And I did most of my research from my laptop. And I just got deeper and deeper. And the deeper you go, the more you realize what an amazing opportunity blockchain is. So regrettably, after a mere 6 months of retirement, I had to get my lazy ass off the hammock, and I came back to London to start the dojo. So this is where we are now. Okay, so why is the internet in serious need of an upgrade, and why is blockchain going to be that upgrade? Well, to be fair, it's not really their fault. You know, I look at the internet and I just think, well, it's a bit shit. But to be honest, we always put up with things because we've got nothing better. And we don't realise how bad something is until somebody invents something and then you go, oh Christ, how did we put up with that for so long? And that's exactly what I think the internet is. So, now the only thing is the underlying protocol of the internet is TCP/IP. It was invented in 1973. What else was invented in 1973? Boom, the mobile telephone. Now the problem with a protocol is once it's released, you can't change it, because if you do change it, like Ethereum for instance, everything breaks. So once you release your protocol, you have to stick with it. But look at the amazing kind of technological advances we've made with mobile telephones, and actually the internet hasn't been able to do that. I don't know if you know, there were 7 internets. So they had to slug it out with the ARPANET and all the rest of it, and then finally they realised that there can only be one public internet. It's ridiculous to have interoperability and all those points of failure. And that's exactly what will happen with blockchain. There'll be tons of private blockchains, but there can only be one public blockchain. So I call the internet a leaky old bucket. And the reason I say that is because essentially it has 6 massive points of failure that the blockchain will address all of those. These headers are not coming, I don't know why. It doesn't matter. Okay, number 1 is I don't know why. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I can talk through it. So number 1 is fraud. That's supposed to represent fraud and criminality, because that's one of the massive issues in terms of the internet. At a stroke, the blockchain will eradicate a huge amount of criminality. Why? Because A, it's transparent, and B, because you can't retro-engineer it. It's rock solid in terms of technology. Number 2, that's supposed to say data stuff. It's rubbish at transferring data. First of all, it's insecure. You can't shunt big points of data. You've got to use WeTransfer. It's hopeless. The next thing, of course, the banks do want to release their central bank digital currencies, but they need rock solid rails in which to release those, right? It is something which is scalable, which is secure, and also which has very low transaction fees. So all that is coming, so there's a pent-up demand with these guys, they're just waiting for the right technology to fall into place. Also, the internet is dumb. It's really stupid. It's an information retrieval lookup system. It's kind of like a upgraded Yellow Pages. So whereas the blockchain is Turing complete. And what that means is it computes in real time. It actually pulls in together all the different devices, and it recognizes when something is efficient and it rewards you accordingly, but it also recognizes when things are inefficient. So there's capitalism. So because of what we've done with the internet, we've allowed these companies like Google and Facebook and all the rest of this to essentially rape and pillage our data. They ambush our data and then sell that to the highest bidder. And we've lost control of our kind of digital footprint. And here's the big one, and this always kind of winds me up as well, is when we get accused of proof of work, we're an energy hog. No, we're not. Because the way we have the internet structured at the moment, it means we have pointless duplications of effort. It's so stupid. Whereas if we were having the corporates, just like they do with the cloud, outsourcing it, Amazon Web Service, then you actually get the economies of scale. So once everyone has finally woken up to the blockchain, and once they've actually recognized and realized, then actually all of a sudden we are the most eco-friendly in terms of business processes. Alright, doesn't matter. Right, so let me talk about IPv6. Right, so this is brilliant because this was actually talked about in the Bitcoin white paper, which was released by Satoshi Nakamoto. I don't know if he's still here. Satoshi Nakamoto, he's still there? Yes, he is. Yes, okay. We actually had him in the room. So he talked about this, but the problem is, so he created a technology, but we didn't actually have the IP addresses, we didn't have the scale to be able to fulfill his vision. Now we do. So let me explain. So we have 4.3 billion IP addresses. That sounds a lot. Not really. Because actually there are 8 billion people on this planet, we all have multiple devices, we're all going to do wearables. Of course, Internet of Things is going to connect everything, both whether it's cars, or your appliances, or whether it's industrial things. So clearly, 4.3 billion IP addresses is rubbish. So we need something much grander and with greater scale. IPv6 gives you 340 trillion IP addresses. So we've got enough to be getting on with. But here's the kicker. What it actually does is it creates those IP addresses cryptographically, which means for the first time ever, you can actually send data. Hang on, I've got a tickly throat. You can send data or money or any kind of financial transaction safely and securely. And you disintermediate the existing incumbents, the likes of Visa, MasterCard, and don't get me going about PayPal, right? Who are hopeless. So you can actually have, for the first time ever, a direct connection that does kind of micro payments. Now, at the moment, we have to rely on these guys. Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal. These are so inflexible. We're back to the Silicon Valley duopoly, where these guys, they disenfranchise a third of the world because you have to have a bank account or an address, and they charge minimum fees of 30 cents. Did you know that a third of the world survives on $2 a day or less? 50% of those live on less than $1 a day. Now, can you imagine? Not that these guys would ever allow those people access, but they would be taking a third of their daily wealth in terms of their fees. So surely there has to be something better, and blockchain is the solution. Now, I've got a couple of little use cases, but can you imagine? This is just a tiny tip of the iceberg in terms of what is possible and what's coming down the track. So, you imagine, these chaps in the developing world, they go and catch a few fish, and they probably sit at the side of the road trying to sell those fish for a couple of dollars a day, let's say. All of a sudden, they're now part of the digital economy. They've got a mobile phone, they're hooked into the blockchain, they can actually pre-sell it to markets, to restaurants, to shops, or whatever, and they only get charged 1/1000th of 1 cent. So that's the first use case. Closer to home, of course, we've all been doing online research. We're halfway through an article, it's really good, and then that annoying pop-up comes up and it goes, hello, I'm the Washington Post, and you have to subscribe to the Washington Post at $10 a month to finish the rest of that article. Goodbye. Whereas if actually the pop-up came and said, well, actually we're going to charge you 2 cents, you'd be like, let's go. So that's just 2 tiny little cases of what's possible. Okay, these slides are all over the place, it doesn't matter. Okay, so let me tell you what blockchain isn't. And this is what happens all the time. We always get conflated with Bitcoin, blockchain, and crypto. Now, blockchain is the engine. And clearly, to make an engine work, you need oil and fuel. The oil and fuel is, in fact, Bitcoin. Because essentially, that is it's a marker to tell you exactly what has happened, and they call it tokenization. So it's a transaction marker. So someone needs to get paid, they get paid kind of tokens, which is a fractionalized percentage of something. What it isn't is a grossly bloated, turgid, over puffed up, inflated, hemorrhaging, like a foie gras. So we all know, that a foie gras is like terribly wrong, but it's very rich, very wealthy. but that's what crypto is. Crypto is just, it's kind of like fed 5 times a day of just wild investor speculation. And therefore, as a consequence, they've stripped out all functionality. It has absolutely no utility whatsoever. Where Bitcoin has been invented to have complete utility with the blockchain. And what these guys do is they take away all functionality and they sit on this imaginary shelf and they call it digital gold. You've never heard anything so preposterous in your life. Because all they care about is the coin price. So, has anybody seen the movie The Big Short? Great movie. So, if it smells, it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And that's exactly what it is. So, with Bitcoin, it is an artificial nonsense. There is no intrinsic value whatsoever. It's an asset purely and simply based upon investor sentiment. And once that investor sentiment collapses, then just like the goose who meets an untimely end, that's exactly what is going to happen with Bitcoin. Right, on to my final slide. So, now, I suppose when you look at the benefits of blockchain, it reminds me of when I was in Hawaii in 1994. And literally I was there at a bar, and I bumped into this guy, and he'd just come off a Tony Robbins weekend. So he's kind of pumped up, he's Californian dude, and he's like, yeah man, you've got to see this, it's amazing. What is it? It's going to revolutionize the world, it's called the internet. And literally he managed to plug it into a phone socket, and he showed me Netscape. And I was like, yeah, wow, that's amazing. And I said, but what's it going to be used for? Didn't believe it. Anyway, well, he said, companies can put their brochures online and they can have their map of how to get to their office. Maybe they'll have their phone number so they can call them. And then he was struggling and he said, oh yeah, no, we should be going for pizza delivery. Can you imagine? Even though he'd just come from a Tony Robbins weekend, he had no comprehension at how enormous the internet was going to be. right? We just don't have that kind of frame of reference. And I think it's the same with blockchain. You know, it's going to be absolutely enormous, but to actually kind of figure out use cases, it's like, well, anyway, hopefully we've done a better job tonight. So, listen, I've just got a few here. You can't even read it from here, but because there's a tiny screen and your mobile's back there anyway. But please request this and we can send this over to you. So the final thing I would say is the one question that I get asked more than anything else is like, when the hell is it going to get kind of like mass adoption? You know, and it's like, well, okay, let's just deconstruct that question. Because I always say, well, it's a bit like cloud computing. A mere 12 years ago, you get massive corporates and go, no way would we ever hand our entire IT infrastructure, our data, our transaction, our customer database, what, to a third party? Never. And now look, the vast majority of corporates now do cloud computing. Now, given the fact that blockchain has been around for at least 10, 12 years, then in my opinion, I think we're going to hit some sort of critical mass within the next couple of years. We'll see. Fingers crossed. So, Block Venture panel. So, right, if I can just invite up to the panel here, one at a time. I've not seen this. So, the first one I think is, okay, one at a time. But can we have Kim, please? Round of applause. Then we have Simon. Simon, there you go. Big round of applause. We have Rose. Oh, you're there. Hello, Rose. Very well received. And then the final one is Andrea. Do I get your name right? Okay. Welcome on board. Right. Okay. So I've identified a few questions to start with. But of course, we're very interested in you doing Q&A as well. So I'll wrap down a few questions. Now, so Kim, as you saw, she's on TV. One of the things that she has to do, and it's brilliant, is she has to kind of generate revenues from old kind of legacy brands, like the Thunderbirds, for instance. Now, NFTs, as we know, can be almost anything. So whether it's actually kind of videos, whether it's soundtrack, whether it's images, etc. It could even be kind of scripts. And I actually thought, well, quick show of hands, who knows Thunderbirds? Oh, okay, that's good. So what about this? Sorry, Kim, I thought of this last night. I thought, what a brilliant present this would make. And I think this is a case in point in terms of how blockchain and NFTs could be used. What about buying the NFT of the actual phrase, yes, milady? So, you know, Parker, you go, yes, milady. Then imagine that as a piss-take present for your missus. And of course, what you have to do is bragging rights. You could buy a picture of Lady Penelope and Parker. You'd have yes, milady there, but then you'd have the digital authenticity of, you know, so that you own that. Not only would it be a fun present, it's a piece of art, but actually they could then look at it, they could see if it's going up and down, and then you could sell it, because it's a kind of a tradable asset. But anyway, so Kim has to deal with lots of different legacy brands. So the question to you to start with is, what are the most kind of like complicated things in terms of putting that together? What are the kind of the different channels you look at? And how do you overcome those obstacles?
So this all, I love your idea, by the way, but this is what we come across. This is all about rights. Like, we do distribute rights, like we're in the rights business. So in this case, if you would do the Yes My Lady, these rights probably belong to an actor or to Jerry as a group, right? So if we don't own the rights, we can never trade. So this is the first thing that is very important to us. And then the second is like security. How safe is this to go into this business? Is it not working? And you know, the fear that we have as a company, of course, is if you were to buy that NFT and at the time you're buying it, your crypto wallet is being emptied, you know, that could be a huge risk for our reputation as well. So we really need to make sure everything's in place and that we're not responsible as a company for that, but the partner is.
So of the lots of different things you can do with blockchain and NFTs, what particular channels do you monetize?
In Web3?
Well, let's take Thunderbirds as an example. So you mentioned you've got a game.
Yeah, so... I think currently we have 200 different projects going on with lots of different revenue streams. So it's not really one question, but it can be a mobile game, it can be an event, it can be a sandbox activation, it can, you know, be anything and everything as long as it fits the brand.
But you mentioned something that you actually earned more money out of YouTube than you did out of the actual broadcast. How did you do that?
It was typically Nepal, right? Nepal is a very small country and the production budget are very low, so we get a percentage of that. So, you know, the fee from the production, basically the broadcast, is less lucrative, if you like, than the content that we distribute on YouTube, which is phenomenal, and on YouTube we have so many views that we are earning money with that.
So, this is a warts and all conversation. It's only being videoed by Didier at the last. So, of the things that you've done, what would you say in terms of how those you've made? Because we all make mistakes. What would you do differently next time in terms of the next project?
So I think, you know, stepping into new projects, especially like in Web3, where everything is new and the company in general, you know, people are afraid to step into it. I think for us is contracting that in the right way to make sure that first of all you choose the right partner, but also you can get out of these projects because, you know, people would like to promise you everything. Like you said, you know, the blockchain, it's everything, it's going to be the new thing, you know. Everybody's trying to convince you to step in a very large scale. And I think what we try to do is step in at full, small scale first. See how it works, then learning by doing, we recontract to make sure that we have the best deal.
And what would a small project look like?
Thunderbird NFTs, it's a very small project, right?
Okay, so moving down the line, we have Simon from Pontier, who they're a specialist law firm who understand about the blockchain and about Bitcoin and about NFTs and about tokenization. It's reasonably complex, so they get a load of people knocking on their doors all the time. However, you must get a load of customers who conflate the whole kind of crypto, criminality, dark web, etc. So why would a law firm get involved with something so dodgy?
Because it's not dodgy. I mean, it's the short answer. Anything that can ever be invented can be used for the wrong purpose. I think the internet is a very good example of that. We don't have to think too hard about how it can be used and unfortunately abused. For myself, I've been on this journey as well. I started it when I joined Ontario in 2019. And at that point, for me, Bitcoin was all about terrorists and criminals, and that is unfortunately the reputation it had. And I think perhaps it still has lingered a little bit. But the truth is, it can't be used for that. And those are the conversations that I've been having internally with my colleagues, educating them, and internally that we have been having with our other offices around the world, and we have globally to clients of that.
Forward. So obviously you get loads of people knocking on your door and they want specialist help because you are the blockchain lawyers. But what are the key things that they're asking help for? What do they need help from you
in this whole kind of blockchain world?
Right now it falls into largely into two categories. Those who have lost or had stolen their digital assets, and those who are looking to invest in blockchain entities and other forms of digital assets and want to know how to do it. For the former, we're working with a number of people at the moment to trace, locate, and recover those assets. Oftentimes it's as simple as sending a letter. When you find the person who's got it, then we know what you've done, give it back or else, and you'd be amazed how often that actually works. And where it doesn't work, then there are courts to deal with that. And then there are the cases where things happen a lot, where you know you have an asset, a client comes to you and, well, I have this asset, I have X number of Bitcoin, I've lost the private key, or it's gone and I need to access it, can you help me? And the answer is, yes we can. And we're in the process now of, and I won't go into too much detail about it, but we're in the process of trying to convince the courts that the Bitcoin developers have not just the technical capability, but actually the legal obligation to facilitate the restoration of lost and stolen assets where they can't, where you know they're sitting in the address, they haven't moved, you can see them online, but you can't access them.
Thank you, Simon. Let me move down to Rose. Now, Rose works for a company called Sky Labs. Essentially, they're their in-house intrapreneurs, not dissimilar to what the Block Venture Studio does, and they have to analyse new kind of technologies. So, I suppose the question is, clearly that comes with potential opportunities, it comes with maybe huge amounts of disruption. You've probably seen technologies come and go over your tenure there. What is different, in your opinion, about the blockchain compared to all the other kind of tech you've analysed?
Yeah, well, it's not just the technologies during my tenure in Sky. I think that timeline earlier was very telling how I've been in the tech industry. So, I mean, as an organisation and as a group in Sky Labs, we've been spending the last 2 years really trying to work out methodologies that enable us to explore technologies that are going to be impactful for the organisation. Opportunity and disruption are flip sides of the same coin, right? So we've been working through different approaches, and I think when we look at blockchain, there's probably two key things about it. The first one is the scale and scope of the potential disruption and opportunity, and then the technical complexities. So we'll talk about the first one first. In terms of the scale and scope, when we think about the communities that when Sky as an organisation, obviously the first one is consumers. When you look at what we're offering consumers, it's not just entertainment, that's probably what we're best known for. But we're shipping boxes and equipment and physical products, and we're offering in-home connectivity and broadband, and we've got mobile, Sky Mobile as well. So the breadth of the businesses that we've got, when we think about our consumers, we've got to think about them in lots of different environments. The second group, I guess, is the content creators and the content economy. And we would expect amazing opportunities and disruption within that. They're also starting to merge with our consumers, so consumers are now creating much more content. The third group would be around brands and advertisers, and then underpinning all of that, we have got our actual organisation So like every big gnarly corporate, we've got all the activities that go on within that organisation. But then when we think specifically about blockchain, we can expect that the structure of the organisation, the processes that we use, will need to be adapted and will need to evolve.
As you've kind of implemented lots of projects, tech projects, what, in terms of sharing with the audience, what are the, let's say, the 3 things that they absolutely must do to make their implementation of a blockchain project into their corporate?
I'm trying to be limited to 3. Let's take. I think with blockchain, you know, it is technically complex. I think asking for help and support from the network. There's an amazing community out there like you guys. And I've been in tech a very long time. I haven't seen a community work together to bring people on the journey in the way that I have with blockchain. So there's not just a ladder being thrown down to help people get involved. It's a cargo net, so that many more people can get involved. And I've noticed that particularly with the female community. I've been blown away at trying to lower the barriers. That brings me on to the second point, which is jargon busting. Don't let people get away with the jargon. Get them to explain it, because there will be at least 2 or 3 other people in the room who will go, oh, thank God you had them explain that. And then I think the final one, and this is probably true of all new technologies in an organisation, is you have to take the organisation with you. So you have to find a way of engaging many departments across the organisation. That means taking the suits with you. So engaging with your marketing teams. We're talking about major business model disruption. So your marketing, your sales teams, finance, legal, compliance, all of those folks need to be with you. And that's actually why being able to develop a common, accessible vocabulary is really important.
We're going to bring Andrea in now. Now, this is fascinating because he works for one of the oldest companies in the UK. He works for CHRISTIES. They are 270 years old. Unimpeachable reputation. Can you imagine? They sell Rembrandts, etc. So him and his team, they pitched the idea of selling CryptoPunks and Bored Apes to the board. And I can only imagine what their board looks like, right? So essentially, I would love to be the fly on the wall to see that presentation. How the hell, right, how did that presentation go, and how did you manage to persuade them to let you loose on NFTs?
That's a very good question. I sometimes have to think about it twice that we're in this position. You're right, CHRISTIES is a very old company. And in those first moments where we looked at the possibility of selling NFTs for the first time, the conversations that were very much around, what's an NFT? What are we selling here? All those conversations with our senior staff, our other specialists. I come from a specialist background, so I deal with physical art and objects, and so does everybody else in the company. But getting them to understand that actually there was this new market, this new segment, it helped that it was in early 2021, so we've already been in the kind of early stages, 1 year into the pandemic really. So we decided to finally pitch the idea of selling Beeple's 5,000 Days, which was the first NFT that was sold at auction. It was almost easier to do because we had to pivot into digital a lot more. Physical auctions were not happening, so it's one of those, when we talk about convergence and confluence, that was a great moment where actually, if we hadn't been in that position, it would have been probably a lot more difficult. And following from that, luckily, it was a very successful sale, and it sold for $60 million, which was unheard of.
One NFT.
One NFT. Well, it's one NFT, but it's comprised of a lot of different actual NFTs and images. It's a great work, and we chose it because the artist was present in the space and in the digital space for a long time, so he was a native digital artist. He wasn't somebody who was now, as you see people coming into it from left, right, and center because they're suddenly jumping on the bandwagon, and that's, I think, what also led us to kind of down that route initially.
So, obviously, NFT, incredibly successful. My God, you must have had a pat on the back for pulling 63 million quid out of digital. Was it some rugby pixelated picture of a bored ape, right? So, what are the things in terms of blockchain or NFTs or Bitcoin are Christie's looking at, and what are the uses of blockchain do you think are for the art market?
That's a good question. I mean, it's one step at a time, I say. I mean, we've gone this far, and we've now, the success that we had with Beeple allowed us to kind of position ourselves as the primary auction house for NFTs, which we feel like we are, and we've constantly continued to offer NFTs within our sales format. There's still physical auctions, which is part of the problem, but just yesterday we actually released the launch of Christie's 3.0, which will be a completely on-chain auction website where you can basically buy NFTs from Christie's, isolated from the normal sales cycle of auctions that we have every 3 or 6 months, which is a huge deal for us because beforehand we would, I don't know if you've seen outside, we've got a couple of our boardings, which was the first triptych that we sold in the UK and Europe last year, and that will allow us to have the conversations because in the art world, provenance is an incredibly important thing, and so blockchain allows us to be a lot more transparent and be a lot clear about where all this passage of ownership has been in the past, which is something that is incredibly powerful because it can literally make a difference between a £1 million work and a £10 million work if you know exactly what the provenance is accounted for.
Alright, so I have more questions, but I'd like to open it up to the audience, please. You, sir, you tell me the question and then I'll repeat it back, because in case they can't hear you.
Yeah, sure, I'll try to speak out. So, hi there, I'm Mike, me and my co-founder, we're looking at the NFT marketplace for original. So, just want to find out your last point about ownership and identity. What are your thoughts on soul-bound tokens to be a bit more transparent when it comes to the ownership of, and provenance, you spoke about it.
But provenance and soul-bound tokens, you said? Okay.
The art market, sadly, is not the most transparent market to begin with. It's an opaque market where few people are, with vested interest, are kind of present. What I think at Christie's we try to do by becoming a public auction house is that we put to the public, and this is where we go back to reputation, we stake our reputation on what we present. So the secondary markets are pretty important for us. Obviously, the NFTs that we choose to sell have to be vetted, and we have to have a clear understanding of where they're coming from. And so that's always been part of the process and part of the conversation. With this new venture, it was released yesterday, so I don't even have that much idea of exactly what's going on behind, but I know that because it's one of those things that's always been important to us, I think provenance and transparency is very important.
Okay, I'm going to try and skip it along so we can get as many questions and answers. Can you limit it to no more than a minute answer, please? Okay, hang on. So we've got a few. So let's start with Richard.
To Rose and Tim. So, digital rights management. So, how do you see the blockchain helping transform our digital rights?
How do you see the blockchain helping you with digital rights management? And this is to Rose and Kim.
Well, I guess the sort of obvious use cases around piracy, but I think the more interesting discussion is around what happens with content supply chains and how you start to introduce, with more transparency, recognition of the different parties throughout the supply chain and the role that they have played in that, because the value at the moment is very much concentrated in the hands of very few players. And actually, as we could start to see more equity within that supply chain. So that's what I'm personally quite interested in.
Next. Annie, you're next after this lady here. So yes, Formula. In fact, just what you do.
I'm Christina Yan Zhang from the Metaverse Institute. So we know in the Web3 space, one key factor lots of founders will be thinking about is how to build a really strong community that will really maximize the benefits of the product or service they are using. So my question to the panel is, do you have any advice for them how they can build this ground up, decentralized community to really benefit from this movement? Thank you.
You want to have a go at that?
I'm going to use this as an excuse to bring in my major hobby horse, which is for communities to be able to join, get together. I think the barrier to joining that community really needs to be really low, and one of the major challenges that we need to solve is the usability and the accessibility of the technology. And my real fear as a sort of dyed-in-the-wool product person is that we can already sense that a lot of consumers are already struggling with everyday technology. So how can we lower the bar to accessing the amazing superpowers of this technology?
So, Annie, you're on.
Hi, my name is Annie, and I'm one of the founders of this question is specifically for Q, because you mentioned a few projects. How can you bring this heritage brand into this space of being sustainable and commercializing this project?
So I think Annie said, how can you bring a heritage brand into your environment, but also make it sustainable and commercialised? Don't really know what that means.
Well, it all starts obviously with fandom. Do these brands have lots of fans? Is it concentrated? Is it attractive for consumers? If so, then what kind of experience do you want to offer the consumer? It should be so true to the brand, and it should really bring something to the table there. So if people feel this is an experience, they can't get it anywhere else, and it really takes them into their world, they do intend to stay, and also they do intend to convert into money.
Simon the bus now, because seeing as these guys know everything about blockchain apparently, because they're lawyers, then clearly you must actually have recognised all the amazing benefits, and you must have introduced all those amazing things into your business to make your business so much more efficient. Do you want to just talk us through all the amazing things that you actually introduced?
As someone who's been hit by a bus, I know that's exactly how I feel right now. I think first of all, I don't pretend to know everything about blockchain. I think if I stood here and said that I did, you would know straight away that I was lying, because it's too early on and it's too big for any one person as to have a complete overview. It's not possible. Law firms, we tend to be very risk averse as companies, but what we have been doing ourselves is, this point earlier, is educating ourselves. To allow us to educate our existing clients, going out there talking to new clients about the benefits, and actually speaking with the venture studio and Osman and Ari about exactly what it is we can do from our internal processes and to decrease those costs, whether it's on the client onboarding or accounting side, or whether for clients themselves to reduce the cost of, in my case, litigation, and there are various key parts of the litigation process which are very expensive. How can we reduce those costs by introducing the blockchain element to it? On the corporate and commercial side, similarly, and it's about, to steal from Tony Blair, education.
I've got another little
under the bus question. Rose, it's your turn. I noticed on your CV that you were a head of digital something for HMV, which we all know that HMV went a little pear-shaped, and all the kind of clever things you're doing in Sky Labs, clearly you weren't doing them for HMV. Discuss.
So it's true, I haven't sort of talked publicly about my experience at HMV. I think the first thing I would say is that it was an amazing, really amazing company with a fantastic culture. And nothing I'm going to say is a criticism of any of the people who were there at the time. What I've taken away from my experience there is it's like a career lesson in what happens in organisations when you just don't leave yourself enough runway to make the changes that you need within your organisation. And I think that's ultimately what happened there, was that change did change, and the shift to digital, e-commerce, m-commerce, it had to happen very, very quickly, and really the organisation ran out of time. So one, it's about making sure you've got enough runway, and for that means starting to experiment early, and understanding where the value might lie and how you're going to need to adapt your organisation. The second thing is, what really underpinned a lot of that was a fear of cannibalisation, and that's something that a lot of mature businesses, particularly mature businesses, really struggle with, is that fear of cannibalisation, and that was there. And the third thing really is, in terms of a career lesson, is you've got to look at the incentives that are within your organisation. What and who are you incentivising, and is that ready for change and transformation?
Let me hand the microphone over to you.
So, have you been part of any blockchain projects that are not specifically within payment space, other use cases, and those projects failed? And beyond the sophistication nature of the technology, why did such projects fail from your experience?
So social projects fail on blockchain, is that what you're saying?
I tell you what, I know just the man to speak to outside. He's called Craig Wright. Okay, I'll put it together. Right. Any last question? I wanted to ask Kim. Now, obviously, big organisation, ITV, lots of different departments. You amongst us friends here, who are the real pain in the backside departments where, I can imagine the IT guys like, well, hang on, you're trampling into my space, how dare you suggest a new technology, I'm in charge of that. I don't know. Who are the naysayers and who do you need to get on board, and how do you get them on board?
So first of all, our aim is to get as little people on board as possible. It's important because if you go by every department to tick the boxes, you're never going to get there. So what we are doing is sort of trying to start projects under the radar, which we know from a legal perspective are very good. Because, for example, a big threat for us is also, and equally so, the press department. They're so afraid about ITV's reputation. Everything we do, they're like, no. So as long as we sort of try and test, we prove that we're right, then it starts to grow. Yes, it is all us, third parties, right? Yeah. Yes.
I'd like to start. Any other questions from? Yes, sir. Who's that?
Sandra, what's your view on fractionalised ownership of artworks or really expensive items, so Picasso and 1,000 pieces of ownership, that sort of thing? So it's complicated as well.
I'm not translating that one.
What's your view on fractionalised ownership of expensive artworks, for example, Picasso and 1,000 different pieces on the blockchain?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation about that recently. I personally feel that it's a way to augment the conversation that we're having. So, thank you very much.
Can you hear me now? Perfect. I think it's a good place to augment the conversations we're having about increasing collecting habits and increasing the education around art and also allowing new voices to come through, because obviously fractionalization, you can talk about your Picasso and owning your 1 millionth share of it and so forth, but actually what it can do is it can also bring people that would have never been able to kind of engage with the marketplace into the marketplace and actually have more of an active role in it. So I see it skeptically in some aspects, because I feel that there's only so much you can take it, but I also feel that it allows new conversations to start every day. And what they're doing is also with the particle and those reasons.
Thank you all. Okay, actually, funny enough, the last under the bus question, as I like to call them, is for you. So, now, come on. You are, Christie's. You're used to, having white gloved and getting the Mona Lisa or whatever. But what possible value can you bring in terms of selling a digital product which just goes from A to B? I mean, we don't need all the usual Christie's stuff, right? So I don't understand how you can justify your existence.
It's a great question. I ask that myself every day. How do I justify my existence? Well, it was touched on before, but there's a lot of education is a big part of this, and people that are not in the space look at the space skeptically, and there's a risk involved as well, right? Because you buy the wrong thing, and it trades at one price, tomorrow it trades down here. What we do is that we offer an element of curation to what we offer, and that's what we take into account. I mean, we sold another work by people who then now is the first NFT to go into a museum exhibition at a contemporary art museum in Italy. And so that level, I think, justifies our position in the marketplace. We're offering guidance, which you wouldn't have if you just went onto OpenSea and wanted to buy something.
Access to rich clients.
And access to rich clients.
There you go. Right, big round of applause, please, for our panel. Good to go. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Osmin wants to just say a final 30 seconds, and then we can go out there and then we have some fabulous canapes and food and beverage until 10 o'clock. So thank you very much. Over to Osmin.
Thank you. I think we'll probably extend it's supposed to start at 8, so lots of food, soon be able to go eat it. Anyway, if you can just have the last slide, please. I want to invite you all to join me to participate in exploring new opportunities together. We have curated a roadshow which we're calling the Art of the Possible Roadshow. So after this, the opportunity will be made available to you to sign up, where our team will come into your place of business for half a day at no charge. We will deploy some of these techniques, probably all of them, in terms of researching use cases and challenges in your industry and ideating potential solutions that you could take advantage of. Now, remember, our mission is to drive exponential participation. How are we doing that? By building lots and lots and lots of small businesses. We're working with corporate partners because we believe that you guys are the vanguard of helping to make change a reality. And in so doing, that gives you the opportunity through the distribution of risk, we de-risk the innovation journey that we would like you to take with us, so that eventually you'll be in a position to, for the investment that you eventually make, to receive many multiples of that in startup equity. So feel free to scan the QR code, which I'm going to display a little bit later. But as I'm the last person standing between you guys and a pile of canapes, let's end it here. You've been amazing. Thank you all.